guys, today we're going to talk about ratios. And the I can statement we're working on is I can understand ratios and the language used to describe two amounts. And we're going to focus really on the language of ratios and how do we write that when we're trying to talk about two different amounts. Well, first let's define ratio. A ratio simply compares two quantities. And this relationship is multiplicative. And when we say something's multiplicative, that means we need to multiply or divide when working with ratios. So our recent lesson on equivalent fractions is really going to be important for finding equivalent ratios. And a ratio can be expressed in three different ways. We either write it as a fraction, and this would be read 2 to 3. We can write it using a colon symbol, which is read the same way, 2 to 3. Or we can write it out using the word 2, as in this last example, 2 to 3. So here we have three different problems, and we're going to write each of these ratios the other two ways than what's shown in the problem. So let's do number one together. The ratio of 3 inches to 20 feet, notice it is written with the word 2. So we need to write it as a fraction with 3 over 2 and with a colon with 3 colon 20. We would read that 3 to 20 for both of them. Just like that. Notice, since you were given units, 3 inches to 20 feet, you needed to write your ratio using these units, 3 inches to 20 feet or 3 inches to 20 feet. Now it's your turn. Pause the video and try numbers 2 and 3. Okay, let's check your work. For number 2, the ratio of 26 students to one class is written with a semicolon, with a colon. So you need to rewrite it as with a fraction bar and with the word 2. And here's how your answer should look. For number 3, it's been written in the form of a fraction, 2 boys over 2 girls. So you need to rewrite it with a colon and with the word 2. It's important to note that in each of these examples, the amount that was given first is listed first in all three forms. And when we get to the next couple of examples that we're going to talk about, the order in which I state the ratio in the question is the order that you need to write it when you write it as a ratio. When we have ratios, as I had mentioned earlier, we can simplify them the same exact way we would simplify a fraction. So if you were given the ratio 3 inches to 30 feet, you could simplify this ratio by dividing the top number or numerator by 3 and the bottom by 3, because 3 is a common factor for 3 and 30. And when you do that, you get 1 inch to 10 feet. And I know that this ratio is written in simplest terms because 1 and 10 only have one common factor, 1. So let's look at the shapes below, and we're going to use these to answer the following questions. Number 1, what is the ratio of circles to squares? So to write this ratio, I would have to count the number of circles that I have, which is 6, and that number is going to go first, followed by the number of squares I see in this picture, which is 4. And when I write that ratio, I would write it 6 to 4 because there are 6 circles to 4 squares. But I can write this another way in simplest form by writing 3 to 2, because 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. And I know 3 to 2 is written in simplest form because the only common factor between 3 and 2 is 1. Let's try another. What is the ratio of circles to triangles? Well, to do this problem, I first count the circles, which I already know there are 6 from the last problem. Then I count the triangles, and I see there are 2. So my ratio would be 6 to 2, or in simplest form, 3 to 1. Because if I divide 6 by 2, I get 3. And if I divide 2 by 2, I get 1. And I know that there is only one common factor, 1, between 3 and 1. When I get to a problem like this one, where it says, what is the ratio of circles to total shapes, I need to count the circles, which I already know there are 6, and then count the total number of shapes in this picture. Now, when I count the total number of shapes, I'm going to include circles in that final count. The biggest mistake I see students making on problems like this is they will count up the number of circles and then they'll count up all the other shapes but not include the circles. If you're told to write a ratio of something to the total amount, you need to include even that first category that they've given you. So in this case, I see there are 6 circles and that there are 12 shapes total in this view. So my ratio would be 6 to 12. Or if I simplified this, and I know the GCF of 6 and 12 is 6, so I can say 6 divided by 6 is 1, and 12 divided by 6 is 2, so my simplified ratio is 1 circle to 2 shapes. Now it's your turn. Pause the video and write the ratio of squares to circles, but remember to put it in simplest form. Okay, let's check your work. When I count the squares, I see there are 4. When I count the circles, I see there are 6. And when I simplify 4 to 6, I get 2 to 3. Try this one. Pause the video and write your ratio in simplest form. Okay, when I look at this problem, I see that there are 4 squares and 2 triangles. So my ratio is 4 squares to 2 triangles, or in simplest form, 2 to 1. Try this one. Write the ratio of squares to total shapes in simplest form. Okay, let's check your work. You have 4 squares, and we already know there are a total of 12 shapes in this image. So your ratio is 4 to 12, or when you simplify it, 1 to 3. Here's another problem. Pause the video and try this one. Okay, let's check your work. If I want to write the ratio of triangles to circles, I would count 2 triangles and then 6 circles. So my ratio is 2 triangles to 6 circles, or 1 to 3. Try this one. Pause the video and write the ratio of triangles to squares in simplest terms. Okay, let's check your work. There are 2 triangles and 4 squares, so my ratio is 2 to 4, or in simplest form, 1 to 2. Last one. Pause the video and write the ratio of triangles to total shapes in simplest form. Okay, let's check your work. There are 2 triangles and a total of 12 shapes. So my ratio of triangles to total shapes is 2 to 12, or after you simplify, 1 to 6. We are now done with this video. Don't forget to write a summary of what you've learned from this video and a question that you have, someone else might have, or one that makes others think more deeply on the topic of ratios.